Hello and welcome to Course 3, Advanced Lessons in CodeJumper. This is Lesson 10, Selection and Conditionals. Let's jump right in. So the overview of this lesson is that students at the end of this lesson will be able to develop a program using CodeJumper that uses the selection and conditional statements. And we'll dive into what those actually are. So the outcomes are all students will be able to describe the selection with conditional statements. Most students will be able to recreate programs that use these selection and conditional statements. And some students will be able to create original programs that use selection, conditional statements, and loops. Actually, it's really fun. So let's dig in. So we always have our key vocabulary. So we'll start with selection. So this is a structure in computer programming where if a question is asked, the program decides what to do next based on the answer, sometimes referred to as an if-else statement. So that's the selection. And conditionals, statements that only run under certain conditions. For instance, if condition A is true, then perform this specific action. So a conditional example is, if it is Saturday, I will sleep in. If it is Tuesday, I will go to school. So those are our two key vocabulary words for this lesson. So we always start with our unplugged activity. So our objective is to introduce the idea of a selection structure and conditionals in computer programming and how they tell the program what to do based on the conditions set. So we're going to dive into this in a very hands-on, multi-sensory way. And so what is an if-else statement? To check and see if some expression is true, and if it is do something, otherwise do something else. Defining a statement that evaluates true or false. That's really what an if-else statement is. It's also called an if-then statement. So defining if it's true, so you do one thing, if not, do something else. So for this one, we don't really need many materials. We have one chair for each student and question cards for the teacher. So I would set the classroom up however is most comfortable and what your students are used to, either in the front of the room, on the carpet, in their desks, or even in a community circle where everybody is able to sit around and in a circle and do this activity. So let's dive into what that actually looks like. So what we're going to have, this activity is very kinesthetic. They're using their whole bodies with visual and auditory senses, and it's designed so that all students of any level of vision can participate without any modifications. And the questions we have here are just sample questions. Really create questions that are great for your classroom. So we can tie these questions to computer science and coding because the computer will perform an action based on the answer to the question, just like we're going to do with ourselves. So for example, the question I have is, do you have tennis shoes on? If you have tennis shoes on, stand up and clap your hands. Another question, do you like to eat bananas? Clap your hands and stand up. So the students are answering these questions, and then you can hear auditorily what is going on. And in the lesson, there's more details on what this actually, what all the line by line steps are. And then at the end of all the questions, then we can do that if-else statement. So our question is about riding the bus. So if you ride the bus or drive to school, if you rode the bus, clap your hands. Else, making a honking noise or snapping. So the statement is, if you rode the bus, clap your hands. Else, make a honking or snapping noise. So we have that if-else statement, so the students can hear and see what's happening with their classmates on who's doing what. Okay, now let's jump into our first guided activity. So in this guided activity, students are going to be learning again about selection and conditional statements. Our if-else vocabulary, if an expression is true, do one thing. If not, do something else. And a conditional statement is a rule that will run when certain conditions are met, such as a true or false statement. So for this one, we need to have our CodeJumper kit, our computer science journal, and then we have two selection and conditional code cards, Frere Jacques and Helen's Story, and 2 dice per group. These code cards are at the end of the lesson, which you can print out, copy, put into whatever format that you need. So actually, let's dive in and look at our first one. Our first guided activity, code card number 1, we have a sample program that is usually run by the teacher. You can do it as a group, you can do it in a small group, however you care to. And so we're using the sample sounds, the Frere Jacques sound set, and then we have our code card. So in thread 1, and for our example, we've actually been using thread 2, we have it written out. If 8 is greater than 5, and so we have 8 greater than symbol 5, play ding dang dong for 1 times speed. So then we build that. Else, play sonne le mattine for 1 times speed. And if, and thread. Okay, that's just walking through it verbally. Now let's actually dive into CodeJumper and build it. On my screen, on the right-hand side, I have the program already pre-built. I have the hub attached to the selection pod, which is green and white with the 2 dials, 1 3-spoke, 1 2-spoke. And on the 2-spoke dial, I have 1 play pod attached. And on the 3-spoke dial, I also have 1 play pod attached. And in the app, I have it connected with Frere Jacques as my sound set. And then remember, if we said in our code card, it says if 2 is greater than 7. So the way we set this up in our selection pod is I turn the left 2-spoke dial
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2
to 2, because our statement said if 2 is greater than 7. And in the app, it also says if, in this case, 2 is greater than, currently it says 6, but in the code card it says to turn it to 7. So the 3-spoke dial, I then turn
7
to 7. Then I'm going to go ahead and read the code so we can hear the whole thing.
Thread 2 Frere Jacques. If 2 is greater than 7, play ding, dang, dong for 1.5 times speed. Else, play sonne les matinées for 1.5 times speed. And if, and thread.
Okay, so we've read the code. So if this statement is true, if 2 is greater than 7, it will play that first ding ding dong. Else, so if it's not true, it should play sonne le mattine. So for your students, have them think and pause, which one will this play? Is that a true statement? Is 2 greater than 7? And then let's play and find out. So have them keep it in their head, what they think the answer is, then we'll push play. Okay, so that is not a true statement. That is our else, because 2 is not greater than 7. So then they can go through and you can change your sound or your selection pod dials and go through a whole bunch of different scenarios to see which one would work and get their little brains thinking about what that selection looks like. Okay, great. So going back to our PowerPoint, our second guided activity is a little bit more independent. So on the screen, I have the code card for selection and conditional lesson. And this one is Helen's Story, which we will build in a minute. So on the screen, I have the code card. And the code cards are always set up the same way. We have the thread, in this case, thread 1, but we're actually going to be using thread 3. And then below that, indented, all the play pods, which we will build. And then we have not indented, the next conditional and selection pod, if 2 greater than 7, a play pod. Else, play she sees a ghost, etc. End if, and thread. But we're going to go into this more in depth as we build it. So I'm going to actually change out my play pods and put my program up. So I'm going to switch to the Code Jumper app and the document camera. Okay, so this time we have the hub, which is going to be off screen, just for real estate reasons. And attached to the hub, I have in thread 3, plugging that into thread 3. I have a play pod attached to a second play pod, attached to a third play pod, attached to the selection pod. And for the 3-spoke dial, I have 1 play pod. And the 2-spoke dial, I also have 1 play pod. Looking at our code card, we actually needed to make sure and debug and make sure our program is set properly. So for our first play pod, we need to have it saying Helen is looking for her friends. For the second play pod, we need to say she thinks they might be in the third play pod, haunted house. And then the next play pod, she opens the selection pod, and the 2-spoke dial should be her friends jump out and yell surprise, and she sees a ghost. And looking at the code card, our first 3 all say Helen is looking for, so I need to do some debugging. I'll turn the second one to
she sees a ghost and screams. Her friends jump out and yell, surprise! She opens the door. Haunted house, cupboard. She thinks they might be in the...
There we go.
She thinks they might be in the...
Okay, and then our last one needs to be...
She sees a ghost and screams. Her friends jump out. She opens the door. Haunted house.
There we go. Turn it to the right.
Haunted house.
All right. And then for the... under the selection pod, our 2-spoke dial needs to be her friend.
She opens the door. Haunted cupboard. She thinks Helen is. She sees her friends jump out and yell surprise.
Okay, and the other one, she sees a
cupboard.
Ghost.
She thinks Helen is. She sees a ghost and screams.
Okay, so now that I've debugged our program, we need to look and make sure our selection dials are correct. In the code card, we have 2 greater than 7. So I turn my 2-spoke dial.
1, 2.
It's greater than 7, so I turn my 3 to 7.
5, 6, 7.
Okay, so again, we have a statement here. Let's press play and see which one we get. Again, have your students thinking about this. Have them build this in small groups to see if they can create this whole program and then debug it just like I had to.
Helen is looking for her friends. She thinks they might be in the haunted house. She sees a ghost and screams.
All right, so this statement is an else statement. Again, have your students go through and do different combinations of this if and else to see if they can get both of these different endings to play, to turn those. All right, so I'm going to turn the
6,
dial.
5, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, and play it one more time.
Helen is looking for her friends. She thinks they might be in the haunted house. Her friends jump out and yell, surprise!
Right, okay, so we got both of them. And this is where actually the in our materials list, we had 2 die, so a pair of dice. And what's really fun about this is the students can roll the dice and turn the selection dials to the number on the dice. So they can see, get randomly turn the dials to the different numbers, which is fun. So they can go through a few times and see what they get based on the numbers that they have rolled on the dice. Okay, so going back to our PowerPoint. So that's last part is our exploration. And the exploration, this one is really great fun. Students will create a story by recording their own sound sets and with multiple possible endings. So they can go in, there's so many opportunities in this exploration to do just multi-curricular, multidisciplinary opportunities. They can write a story thinking about possible endings, and the beginning, the middle, and end of stories, writing it in their computer science journal, writing wherever you have them do their writing, and then recording these sounds, each beginning, middle, and ends, putting them into Code Jumper, and then doing the same thing, using the dice, making it into a loop, depending on how they build it. So this exploration is wide open for them to be really creative in coding and in creativity and in writing. There's a lot of options here to really explore and spend some time on this. So that's our lesson 10 for Code Jumper. Thanks for watching.